Hello and welcome to this tutorial, and in this one I'll be showing you how to prevent multiple sessions for a user in your application. So what that simply means is preventing the user to log in on multiple devices or browsers to your application, and we'll be achieving this using the Django middleware framework. So let me show you a brief overview of what we want to achieve. So whenever I log in to my Django application, and I head over to my database, Django creates a table called the Django session, and this stores the session data of logged in users in your application. So you can see the current session is stored for this logged in user. So I could simply come here and delete this, come over here and reload, and you can see it automatically logs the user out. So what we want is whenever a user is trying to log in, it checks if that user is currently logged in our Django application, then replaces his session with the current session he's trying to log in with. So the first thing we'll do would be to get the list of all the logged in users, and we'll be creating a Django model for that, and the name of the model will be logged in user, and to have a field of user, which is a one-to-one field that would store the user model, and we're getting this model from the settings file. So we import django.conf settings, so user model, and the reason we're doing this is in case we are creating a custom user model in our application. So the next thing would be to have a related name, so we could easily just give it a convenient name. So the convenient name I'll choose is logged in user. Then on delete models.cascade. Then the next field will be the session key. I could just simply bring this out. So the next field will be the session key, and this is going to be a car field. With a max length of 32, and the reason I'm choosing 32 is because your session keys are 32 in length. So blank through, null through, then we won't be needing this. Let's just keep the self.username, user.username. So this model is going to get the list of logged in users in our application. So let's go to and migrate this. First of all, let's do a check. Everything is okay. Then we make migrations. Then we migrate. So let's head over to our tables to see if it's created this. Okay, refresh. Then we have the logged in user, and you can see the logged in user is currently empty. So what we want to do next would be finding a way to actually insert the logged in user to our database whenever a user logs in, and we're going to be using signals to do this. So signals simply just broadcast notifications in our Django application. So we want to let our application know whenever a user logs in, it should insert that user into the logged in users table. So the next thing we'll do would be to go to our core application. Then we'll create a new file called signals.py, and besides, I have two applications currently. The core is where we'll be having our logic for the middleware. Then the forum is just this for our login UI, which we already have. This UI is in the login app. So in the signals.py, the first thing would be the signals for user logged in and user logged out, and we'll get that from django.contrib.auth will import user logged in and user logged out. So these are the two signals we'll be using. Then we'll also need a dispatcher from django.dispatch, and this dispatch would be the receiver. So the next thing would be to have our receiver work on the user logged in. So whenever a user logged in, this function would run, which is on user logged in, and it would have the parameter of it will have the keyword args first. No, it will have the sender, then the keyword args. So what we want to do on user logged in is to take that user and impute him into the database. So the model we'll be working with is the from django.core.models import logged in user. So when the user logs in, you should get this logged in user objects dot get or create user would be keyword args dot get user. So what this simply does is whenever a user logged in, he should either get or create that user. So why we're using get or create is to prevent having the same user being inserted to the database multiple times. So if that user is already there, he gets it, or if it's not there, he creates it. So that will be that for this. Then the next one we'll have would be the one for the user logged out. So we'll have the receiver user logged out. Then we'll have a function on user logged out. Then we have the sender and the keyword args. So the same, pretty much similar stuff. So we'll get logged in user.objects.filter where the user equals to keyword args.get. Delete. So so we have our two signal methods to run whenever a user logs in or logs out. So the reason, and if we go to our user logged in signal, you can see it's very, very simple. You have the providing args, which is the request, and the user. So that is how we could actually get this user from the keyword arguments, because the user logged in has the provided args we can work with. So now we've created our signal. The next thing would be to actually register the signals in our application. So we'll head over to the apps.py, and We'll call in the ready function, and we'll import signal from core.signals. That is the signals we just created. And this ready function, we got it from this app config class. And if you head over down, you can see override this method in the subclasses to run code when Django starts. So whenever Django starts, it should import the signal we just created. And now we have to let our application know about this signal, about this app.py file we just edited. So we head over to our settings.py. And update this. So it's going to be core.apps. What's the name? core.app.core.config. core.apps.core.config. Yeah, this is the recommended way Django wants us to do this, although we could just add that in our init.py default app config, but this is a recommended way. You come to your installed apps and point it to the core config. So let's check our application to see if it's actually working. Yeah, everything seems to be working so far. So let's do a simple review. So we created the model and we created the signals. So when the user logs in, you create or get the user. When it logs out, you delete the user. Then in our apps.py, whenever the app is ready, we import the signal. Then in our settings.py, we give it the new app name. So let's try this out. Let's log in the user to see if it works. Let's head over to our database. You can see currently the logged in user table is currently empty. So let's see if this code we've written actually works. So we log in, then we refresh, and it works, but it doesn't have the session key. You can see it actually inserts this to our database and it doesn't have the session key. So that is where the middleware comes in. So now we're going to create a middleware.py class, middleware.py, middlewares.py. So like I said earlier on, the middleware is a framework in Django which helps us to alter our request and response. So what I want to actually achieve in this is whenever a user tries to log in, before the Django application gives that response, you should check if that user is in the database, that is in the logged in user field. If he's actually there, you delete the user and replace it with the current session. So as you can see, the name suggests middleware. It's kind of like interfering between our request and response. So the first thing we'll do would be to import the session model here. So from Django.contrib.sessions.models, because this is what we're going to be working with, session. So that is for this. Then we'll head over to the Django documentation, and I can see, like I explained, it is just a framework of hooks in Django's request and response processing. So there are two ways to create this. If you want to create your own middleware, you can either use the function-based one, or you use the class-based one. So over here you can see, let me just copy this to our application. And let me rename this one session per user. So you can see it has the init function, the constructor, and this is called one-time configuration and initialization. So this is called once in your application. While we also have the call function. So in this section, you have the code to be executed for each request before the view are called. So this is where we want to actually do our check-in. If that user is already logged in our application, then after that you have a response. Then in this section you can actually add some code to be executed for each request or response after the view is called. So the code we want to actually write would be inside this first section. So you can see the Django, creating your custom middleware is pretty much straightforward. You have your class, you have the constructor, and you also have the call function. So over here, the first thing we want to do is to check if the user request the user that is authenticated. So you first check if the user that is trying to log in is authenticated, because by default Django provides the anonymous user, and that anonymous user can't be actually logged into your application. So we have to put in this condition to prevent to check if the user is currently logged in. So if the user is authenticated, the next thing would be to let's create this current session key, and the current session key is going to be gotten from the database current request dot user dot logged in user dot session key, and we can use this logged in user because we specify the related name in our model over here. So let's head back. So the current session key, that means it checks if the user currently logged in. Okay, wait, current session key, yeah. So it checks the user from the database if he has a session key. So the next thing would be if current session key, that means if the current session key exists in the database. Let me just put some spacing. If the current session key exists in the database and the current session key is not equals to request dot session key, yeah. So if the current session key exists in the database and that current session key is not equals to the current session in your browser, what you should do would be to delete that session. So we'll do session.objects.get session key, and we'll pass it the current the current session key. So if the current session key exists in the database and that current session key in the database is different from the one the browser is your Django application is storing in your browser, go back to your database table and delete that session key. So if that is done, the next thing would be to get the user. So we'll say request.user dot logged in user. Yeah, so request.user.loggedInUser.session key should be equals to the one from the browsers, that is request.session key. Then we will save this. So request dot user dot logged in user dot save. So let's save this and see if this code actually makes sense. So the first thing would be to check if the user is authenticated, because an anonymous user can't be authenticated, so this prevents any error from our code. So you now check the current session key. You get it from the database. So if that current session key in the database exists and that current session key from the database is different from the one the browser gives, go to the database and delete that one. So after we delete that, we now get the request.user.loggedin users session key, and we assign it the session key from the browser, then we save. So after this, the next thing to do would be to head over to our settings.py and include this middleware we just created in our middleware's array. So we'll call core.middleware dot, what was the name? One session per user. And we save this. So let's see if our application is still working. So there's an error. Let's see. On line 14. Okay, so request that session key. We have to get the requests. We have to get the session before we get the key. Okay, if the current session invalid syntax. Okay, I forgot to put this silly mistake. Okay, so what is the next error? So we have okay, so that was a silly mistake by me. Okay, so let's see if this is actually working. So first of all, I would log the user out. Let's refresh this and make sure everything is okay. So I would create I'll load up my application. So we have two browsers here. So let me log in this one. So this user is logged in. Let me go to our database and refresh. So we can see the user ID, the ID, the session key, and the user ID. So let me log in from this other window. So I'll do this user then. So this second user logs in. So let's go back to our previous window and refresh. So something is not working because two users can't be logged in based on the code we wrote. So let me refresh this. So it's not working how we wanted. So we have to go back to check our logic. So let's see. So if the current session key and we forgot to call in the delete function. So that was a silly mistake I forgot to put. So you get the session.object.get, you get the session key, you pass it the current session key in the database and delete it. So this line deletes the current key from the database. So we forgot to call the delete function. So first things first, let me go to my, let me log the user out and let me log the second user out. So if we come to our database and we refresh, everything is gone. So let me go through it once more. So I hope you log in the user. Then I go to the other window and log in the same user. So we'll go back to the previous browser and refresh. And you can see it actually works. So we have successfully, let me refresh this, only one should be here. So we have successfully created this application which we set out to create. So this is this prevents the same user from having multiple sessions. So this is how to do that in Django. And thank you very much for watching. Bye.